my friends, and welcome back to this new video. And finally, as you can see in this video, we're now recording at 60 frames per second, thank goodness, because in the past years I was 30 frames all the time. And after showing the update and the last video, which is Super Ghouls and Ghosts, which is the last final video recorded at 480p at 30 frames per second. So this is the last video that I produced. Check the video out. I will leave it a notification icon you see up there. Click on there if you want to desire to watch it. It is a great game. Brutally hard, by the way. It's the easiest of the franchise, but don't let that statement let's say thinking that it's easy. No, still brutally hard, but a great recommended game. Excellent title by from Capcom. As a result, check the video out if you desire. But we're not gonna talk about Super Ghouls and Ghosts, because if you see behind on my TV running the Super Nintendo Junior, this is Street Fighter. But we're not talking about either. I did review that already, long time ago, of course. It's one of my old videos that I did. But today we're not gonna talk about not Turbo, but instead the new iteration of the Street Fighter franchise. Finally, after a load of requests of reviewing Super Street Fighter, because it was a year ago, but since then everyone would reluctantly ask the Turbo version. Well, this is not the Turbo version, instead it's the new iteration of the game, Super Street Fighter 2, which allows you with new characters, new movements, everything. Something that is new and or it's the same game but new assets, new stuff. I will tell you, this is not the Turbo version. The Turbo version never came out on the Super Nintendo. Instead, it came out on the 3DO, which unfortunately I don't own the 3DO and neither the game, so I can't review it for you. Though it exists on the well-known and excellent Street Fighter Anniversary Collection that is available on the Xbox and the PlayStation 2. I would love to have the Anniversary Collection and review it for you, and finally review both Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo, which is balls hard. It's much harder than the original. It's super fast, and I'm not that qualified to. My friends like Dylan, Angel, they dominate those games. Me, unfortunately, I don't have that sensation of speed together because it's really fast. As a result, I'm lacking a lot in the abilities, but I do enjoy the original Super Street Fighter 2. And this one includes the third iteration of the Super Street Fighter 3 Third Strike, which is obviously the third in the series, which is some people. I might review the Street Fighter 3 series, but unfortunately I don't own any of the games because those games were released on the Dreamcast, I believe, and the third iteration was released on the PlayStation, also on the Dreamcast as well. I might review about that in the future. Once I get a Dreamcast, I'll do it, but for now I'll only review the Third Strike, which is available on the collection alongside Super Street Fighter 2. But that's something I will mention a little bit. But anyways, back on track. So why particularly I'm gonna review this game since I reviewed the original Super Street Fighter 2? Well, I love the original, I enjoy the original, and I enjoy what it is. But the trouble is with the original is nowadays is that it's, well, I don't want it to bash it on the game or something. It feels like bare bones, because you only have the main character. For example, you cannot play as the bosses. For example, M.Tyson. I know it's M.Bison, but I prefer to call it M.Tyson. Then you have the Spanish most annoying fighter, Vega, which is Balrog in Japan. Then you have Sagat, the mighty Thailand Mumbai fighter, and then finally Bison, which is Vega in Japan. That's something I didn't mention in the video, but I will mention real quickly. In the original Super Street Fighter 2, when they decided to release it on North America on the CPS2 hardware, well, guess what? They couldn't put the name M.Bison on the boxer because it would sound so exactly the same as M.Tyson. But who cares? It's M.Tyson on Street Fighter. It is the the former heavyweight champion. As a result, but because because Capcom didn't want to avoid legal issues with M.Tyson, they change the names. So for example, Mike Tyson is Balrog, Balrog is Vega, and Vega is Bison. But in my opinion, I always prefer the Japanese names over the American ones. As also, Mike Tyson, Balrog is the Spanish, and the dictator is Vega. But I always prefer Vega Bison, which it's just me, of course. Let me know your opinions, which you prefer on the bosses. Because Japan, obviously they have to change the name to avoid legal issues, which is a common practice on the old days of video games, which is pretty understandable. Some people might get upset about it, but again, this is the nature of the video games when it comes to releasing on other than Japan, of course. So that's a thing that I might not mention on the original, but finally I did. Anyways, so in this game they add the bosses. Well, they did it on Turbo, which they add the bosses, of course, and the speed. But that's not enough. Capcom decided to implement the new stuff because people feel the samey kind of thing. So they made that's exactly in game, of course. So they add new characters. They add Kami, which is the British soldier, just the youngest of the bunch. Then they had the mighty, gigantic American-Mexican, Native American T-Hawk or Thunderhawk, which reminds me of Thunder or Chief Thunder in Killer Instinct. That kind of personality. Then you have, by the way, it's the same exact character, only different abilities, but the up and down ability that he used to do is the same as T-Hawk. Sorry, Chief Thunder on Killer Instinct. Then you had Dee Jay, the Jamaican singer, I think. He's a really cool guy, sincerely. I really like this guy. And then finally you have, I know it's Fei Long, but for me it's Bruce Lee. Yeah, Bruce Lee, because if you compare Fei Long to Bruce Lee, they look exactly identical. For me, it's Bruce Lee and Street Fighter, just like Mike Tyson. My dream come true. Kung Fu versus boxing. Mike Tyson versus Bruce Lee. Well, in this game, just to fulfill my dream. To fill an American and a former American boxing versus a Hong Kong martial artist. Again, I know some people, and of course, I know some people were saying, what about Ken? Well, Ken, if you look Ken, he looks exactly as Chuck Norris when he was younger. Imagine that, Ken as Chuck Norris, and Chun and Vega as Bruce Lee, fighting in the movie. And yes, that happened. The movie is called, Jesus, I put the name in the movie. Well, then Chuck Norris and Bruce Lee was there. Well, Ken and Fei Long made the bread and butter and the icing on the cake. Mike Tyson. That's the why I like about this game. You use your imagination with real people, of course. Anyways, so Fei Long, of course, and which one I think? Fei Long, Kami, T-Hawk, and Dee Jay. Yep, all the four. I was about to say Akuma, but Akuma, also known as, but I always prefer Goki, which is the Japanese name. Remember, Goki and Goken were brothers. That was mentioned in the story. And Goki was the guy who wanted to be the mightiest warrior and evil one. Well, Goken teaches Ken and Ryu, which is a story that comes later, which is added on the Street Fighter universe, but it's a topic that most people will argue, of course. So, well, Goki or Akuma didn't show up in this game, it showed up in Turbo. And no, it doesn't show up like in the status video or the normal way. Instead, in order to get Akuma, you have to do some great difficult patterns to meet there, which I'll mention in a bit later in the video. I know, in order to show up Akuma, if you want to fight him, you have to beat all your opponents without losing. If you did, he shows up, kill Bison, and let me tell you, he's brutal. But again, that's on Super Street Fighter Turbo, not the original, just to keep in mind. Anyway, although the patterns right away, just to tell you. And it obviously is the same as Super Street Fighter, but with new movements, new style. For example, some characters have new upgrades. For example, Ryu gets his iconic Shinkun Hadouken, can receive his Flaming Shoryuken, also known as Shoryuken Repar. which is a flaming Shoryuken, really powerful, much powerful than Ryu. Then you had Chun-Li, the introduction of the Goken, which is obviously the movement. Well, it does introduce in Turbo on the previous game, but not until fully on this game, which they finally perfected her moves with the Goken and other his moves. Honda got his new Banzai technique and his grab attack, but that grab attack was on Super Steve for the Turbo. Saga gets his iconic and infamous Tiger Knee, which is extremely dangerous. Vega is a lot more agile, has a lot more moves, certainly. Bison is the same thing. Blanca, my lord, he's more annoying than ever. In the original, it wasn't that bad, but in this game, it's really annoying. He's bouncing around and just really pisses me off. And some people do like Vega, but not to me, unfortunately. And that's my opinion, of course. Then you had Sagai was the same thing, the same dude. Dhalsim is the same guy. Well, Zangief got his new grappling mechanics, and the bosses, well, other than the Disney chains, obviously the same. The only difference you see are Saga, M.Tyson or M.Bison, if you want it, and Balrog or Vega got new news, except the Dictator, of course. Aside from the Dictator, of course, as a result. Over the new characters, of course. Then you had the new stages. Obviously, you had the Kami, which is British, the Jamaican, Dee Jay, the Mexico, and the Hong Kong, the new stages, which is obviously a new add-on and a new characters as a result. As for the hardware, well, obviously this is a new iteration as a result of CPS2 hardware, and remember this is a new game as a result. That's what Capcom. The reason they introduced the CPS2, a bit of backstory, which I mentioned the CPS1 all the time in the channel. The CPS1 or Capcom Play System 1, it was the first hardware that, well, not the first, they made another hardware, obviously, backstory. The CPS1 is the Capcom Play System hardware. The design is to make the games easier and make use of the JAMA interface. The first game, obviously, I remember is Ghouls and Ghosts. But unfortunately, the game is popular, but unfortunately, it was played with bootleggers, and Capcom really underestimated it badly. As a result, most of the bootlegs flooded on the market. They tried to introduce copy protections, but unfortunately failed because it was easy to bypass it. Even the iteration of the CPS Dash, which is CPS 1.5, which introduced Cadillac and Dinosaurs, Saturday Night and Wrestling, and The Punisher, which is a very underrated Marvel game, a beat 'em up, really good beat 'em up. I would love to review the arcade itself, the CPS Dash hardware, but unfortunately, those are too expensive. Well, they tried to make them, but unfortunately, those easily get hacked or just simply get bypassed. That's why Capcom decided to go and make a new hardware to stop the bootleggers. And speaking of bootleggers, that's why Capcom made a lot of iterations of Super Street Fighter, or Street Fighter, I would say. Because if you saw the infamous, or rather famous, Street Fighter 2 Rainbow Edition, which I'm gonna put a video, well, not a video, a link of the game itself if you want to watch it. I would love to show it, but unfortunately, I don't want to be in trouble with other guys who pass their videos, since you know what's needed. As a result, I'll put the links down below. Anyways, the Rainbow Edition was the point that Capcom made other innovations, such as Turbo and the Champion Edition that add the bosses and that amplifies the speed. But that was enough. Capcom decided to do more than that. They wanted to address those issues. So they made back to the drawing board and made the famous and rather well-known CPS2 hardware, or Capcom Play System 2. And this game, Super Street Fighter 2, introduced the hardware in a big way in 1993 for the arcades. Well, the CPS2 it's like a giant game cartridge. Well, it has two boards, the B board and the A board. The B board contains the well, is the Yamaha Edge connector, and the A word is the game itself, which contains the battery. Speaking of the battery, let's talk about the suicide battery itself. The suicide battery, or CMOS battery RAM, what it does is save the cryptic in the ROM and the patches, all inside into the encryption somewhere on the board. Once the battery dies, the game becomes a paperweight. Replacing the battery doesn't help because it's all white. You have to replace it when the data is there, which is quite a very tricky situation, because if you replace the battery or take too long, you pretty much destroy the game by yourself. So you have to be very diligent. And no, in the CMOS battery or suicide battery, it's not even new. Sega introduced it first in 1995 or 86 on one of the games called Shinobi on the Sega 16 hardware. What it does is, some games have the Z88 battery encrypted. When it dies, no sound, but it is encrypted on the model of the 68000, which powers the motherboard. Then the game doesn't work. That's how the encryption works, and that's how the cut protection worked back in the day. Because bootleggers were out there to bootleg everything, no matter what, just to take a quick penny and may take advantage of the arcade operators at the time, which is quite normal and popular at the time, because arcade operators wanted it cheap and they bought these bootleggers. As the big companies such as Capcom didn't receive any revenue out of their games, as a result, they had to find a way to protect their games, which is obviously a common thing. So the CPC introduces and makes their life a lot harder for the thieves, and the cut protection wasn't even beat until years later. Check out the video of Modern Vintage Gamer, which explains better on the cut protection as a result. The link is down below if you desire. As well, how the hardware works, the battery, and how to replace it. It's down there in the description, so I don't have to show the clip in the video. As a result. Anyways, so this is the game that introduced a lot of it. And obviously, the original revitalized the franchise, but this game amplifies it. Although by the time Super Street Fighter 2 came out, people were really tired about the same thing, other than the introduction of Akuma, which is extremely overpowered and broken, and become another famous boss, aside from Bison, which is Vega in Japan. And that was the time that Capcom decided to just move on to the classic Street Fighter and made fresh new ideas, such as Darkstalkers, the Alpha series, and the famous and well-known X-Men Shadow of the Island, which is an excellent game that introduced before Marvel vs. Capcom, the iteration and the origins of Marvel vs. Capcom. As a result. And this game was not alone. It was not only introduced on the CPS2, it was also introduced on pretty much on two consoles, the Super Nintendo and the Genesis. I had the Super Nintendo version. That's the version I grew up with, and it's by me a really good port, sincerely. Though Genesis has a bigger memory, this one is 24 megabyte or 30. I'll put the exact data of the SNES version. So the Genesis is 40 megabits of data, but I'll put the exact data as well. So as a result, you might think that the Genesis version is better than the SNES, right? The answer is no. Wrong. The Genesis version, sadly, unfortunately, I feel sorry for the Sega owners out there. They received the worst port, I'm afraid. First of all, the SNES version has a great, amazing music. And some of the improvements, such as the music of M.Bison, Vega, the Iguana is good. Some of the music sounds really good. In fact, better than the SNES arcade versions, in my opinion. Just my taste, of course. And it has a good format, and it has a tournament mode. It has a lot of more stuff in it. The same with the Genesis, but unfortunately the music. Why Capcom needed to butcher up the Genesis? Why? And this is the reason why Capcom didn't do very well with the Genesis very well. Only 2 games. Those are the Mickey and the Mega Man game. The rest of the games were utterly bad. They should have let Sega to do it, like I did with Ghouls and Ghosts, which Sega made on the ground up by Yuji Naka. Well, Capcom decided to go out of their comfort mode and make their own games. Unfortunately, not so well. Like, Capcom were a little lazy in my part. So when they made the report of Super Street Fighter, my lord, they couldn't choose the worst voice and the worst music. And has the worst sound effect in the system. First of all, the music is less exciting, and the bass doesn't have a punch. As a result, it sounds tinny. The voices are the worst. Since the Genesis doesn't have the echoing effect or reverb or delay module, they baked the voices into the memory. That's why it weighs 40 megabits instead of 20 and 24 in the SNES. Demonstrate how Capcom made a lot of good job on the SNES and the Genesis made it worse, which makes me sad sincerely because the Sega owners could have enjoyed the game. And there's the third problem, the controller. On the SNES, you can easily control the characters, but on the Genesis, you have to use the start to block, and it's really cumbersome. Some might get used to it. Me personally, it's too much for me. I'd rather use. As a result, you need to get a 6-button controls. As a result, if you want to play Super Street Fighter on the home consoles, get this one. This is the one I recommend to play. But if you don't have the Super Nintendo and you want to play the Turbo version, well, unfortunately, you have to own the 3DO version. But don't worry, the PlayStation 2 and the Xbox Anniversary Street Fighter solve that problem with you easy. Okay, that was of course of the SNES and the Genesis, of course. Now, and as a result, if you want to play the game, go with the SNES version. You decide. And I'm gonna play this game, of course, but I warn you, I'm not the greatest Street Fighter 2 player in the world since I'm really rusty as a result, because I haven't played this game for a long time ago. So as a result, I apologize for those who are really want to know to be the real player. No, I'm not of those, unfortunately. But my buddies, Dylan, Heido, those are superior than me. As a result, so I'm gonna put this game on the SNES Junior and see what it is. Let's go to the game. It's time for the fight. Mexico!
You win! You win! England! You win! Perfect! You win! Perfect! USA! You lose! You lose! 9! USA! You lose. You lose. 9. USA. Shoryuken! 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 Hadouken! 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 You lose. Shoryuken! Hadouken! Hadouken! You lose. 9. USA. Shoryuken! 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 Hadouken! Shoryuken! 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 You lose. shoryuken! 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 USA! Shoryuken! Shoryuken! Up! You lose. Hadouken! Shoryuken! Shoryuken! Hadouken! Shoryuken! Hadouken! You lose. You lose. You lose. Nine. USA. Tiger. Shoryuken. 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 Fight. Tiger uppercut. Tiger. Tiger. Tiger knee. You lose. Tiger uppercut. Tiger uppercut. Tiger. Hadouken. Tiger uppercut. You lose. Tiger. USA. USA. Shoryuken! Shoryuken! Hadouken! Hadouken! Shoryuken! 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 You lose! Shoryuken! Attract Seppuken! Shoryuken! Attract Seppuken! Hadouken! Shoryuken! Shoryuken! Hadouken! Attract Seppuken! Shoryuken! You lose! 9, 8, 7, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
I hope you enjoyed this video of Super Street Fighter 2, and it is a great, amazing game. It's one of the best fighting games of the Super Nintendo and period as a result. If you found this game, pick it up. It's really amazing, sincerely. And but if you don't have the SNES version, you can play on the on Super Street Fighter, Street Fighter the Anniversary Collection on the PlayStation 2 or the Xbox. You can also play, unfortunately that's the turbo version, but you can adjust the difficulty if you desire, and all this. It's very versatile, that version, if you want to play the full experience on the PlayStation as a result. And no, unfortunately the SNES version is not available on the Nintendo Switch Online server, neither the SNES Classic Edition. You only had Turbo, of course. But if you want to play this game somewhere else, you can play on the Wii U, 3DS, and the Wii version of Virtual Console. Although in the Wii version you have to somehow get the WAD. On the Wii U and the 3DS, you can get this game for really good price. So you can get there. As a result, and this is by far, this one and the Turbo version were the last iteration of the classic series, because following that, as I mentioned, Darkstalkers, Alpha series, and in the future Street Fighter 3. The Street Fighter games still getting, well, somewhat get better, but then you had 4 and 5, which was, 4 was by many people was the last great game, and 5 was a big letdown for many as a result. So like, it has its up and down as a result. The series is still there as a result. It is a great series, and it is a big reason that is a big must-have for Super Nintendo owners as well Capcom fans. And that's about it for this video, sincerely. And obviously I mentioned in the Halloween that I didn't plan to make any reviews on November, but because I was like, hey, I want to review something as a result. And this is the game that I did stream in Twitch as well in Instagram, just to show off, sincerely. And I might review another game, but in December. And I will upload a gameplay of Metroid Prime, but it's an old video, rendering 60 frames per second. I will show it in the next occasion to show the capabilities of a CRT in recording. I will show it in the occasion, so be patient. And in December, as I promised in my update video, one will be in December 1st. That will be the first video. I won't tell what game it is. I won't spoil it. The second video, it's another well, in December 25 is the anniversary and the retrospect of the PlayStation 2, which I'm still working on it. And the last video is obviously Street Fighter 2010, and that will close down for this year and the video. So I'm still working on it. And that's about it, my friends. I hope you enjoyed this video. I wish I could talk more about Street Fighter, but what do you expect? It's a great, amazing game, so there's not much to it, sincerely. Anyways, that's it for this video. Hope you enjoyed, and see you in the next video. See you next time. Take care. See you next time.